and other individuals who were there at the time. I don't know if you know, but there's a Hernando de Soto. Remember de Soto and Christopher Columbus? When they got to America, and that's the adjoining islands, and de Soto went to the land and verified the same thing, the actual continent. They said, in their own writing, Christopher Columbus said when he got here, he saw dark-skinned people, copper-colored people, Moors, trading in gold-tipped spears. My. So let me see what I can find here. And this is what I want to give you some history. And again, this particular book is A People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn. Now, here's what I know. I'm sure if you have never heard this information before, it's truly shocking. I mean, it's going to shock you. What information? The information that the so-called black, the so-called Negro, the so-called African American didn't come over here on slave ships in the numbers that they claim. Matter of fact, a small minority did. The vast majority, in the millions, were already here. So I'm sure you're going to be upset about it. And the other question you asked, you wanted to know more on that. And then you said, man, can you go into what's wrong with saying black? Black is the antithesis to white racism. What's wrong with saying Negro? What's wrong with saying colored? A lot of good people were known as Negroes and colored. And what's wrong with saying you said African American is wrong? We are a legal nation. I did. We are a legal nation. Everything's in law. So I'm going to try to break that down. So let me start here. There are a couple of elephants in the room, and you guys bumped on both of them. The first one is, if Africans were already here in America, then how do you explain the narrative of the African diaspora? You know, the African to America slave trade. Well, first I want to point out that there was a triangular goods trade that existed between America and Africa, continental Africa, I'm calling it that now. There are many names. We talked about that earlier. And Europe. So Africa, America, and Europe. Now think about it like this. Now, when the Europeans got into the slave, that triangle, they joined that as the last piece of the triad, and that happened in 1492. And this is when the Moors were defeated in Alhambra, the last Moorish stronghold. And the Europeans, and I don't like to say just Europeans, because it was really Moors fighting Moors too. It was European mix and Moors fighting Moors. I almost want to say kind of like the light-skinned Moors fighting the dark-skinned Moors. I know that sounds crazy, but that's what your history is. So the Moors had already set up trading posts and established trade with the, American territory way before the Europeans got involved. And they established this trade with the American territory and, of course, the associated islands in the region, like the Bahamas and the Guiana Islands and the Venezuela and the Antilles. There was a trade route already existing, proof of it, way before 1492. As a matter of fact, the land here was like the oasis, man. It was seen as the untouched, super fertile land. This land of the American territories, the present day U.S. Now, here's what happened. When the families of the armies of Isabella and Castile and Ferdinand of Aragon united, now, they were able to defeat, like I said, the last stronghold of the Moors, and this was in Granada or the Alhambra. And what happened is the seaports in that area were now owned and controlled by the Europeans. combination of Europeans, light-skinned Moors. When Christopher Colon, most say Columbus, came to the Americas, he was led by Moorish maritime navigators. He saw copper-colored people in the Americas trading in gold-tipped spears. Now, while I'm on this point, I want to point out that Christopher Colon, most call him Columbus, he sailed the ocean blue in 1492, but never stepped foot on the modern-day continental American territory. I just want you to know that. Never stepped foot on it. By 1502, Columbus had enslaved all of the copper-colored people on the associated islands of that region. How fast was that? How did he do it that quickly? So in 10 years, he got the whole region enslaved. This is just the islands. Plenty of room, plenty of people. He ultimately killed thousands of copper-colored natives. And his brutality, yeah, we got to get on him. I got to let it know. His brutality against copper-colored people was legendary. This is what the old books share. We don't get that here. Hey, we got a holiday after him. He once caught a native stealing and cut off his nose and his ears. That's documented. There were other reports of Christopher Colon, most say Columbus, punishing the natives by cutting off their arms for minor offenses. Columbus was also put on trial for the mass genocide of the people of that region, the copper-colored people of that region, the Asiatic people of that region. But he was virtually acquitted. So what else is new? Then Hernando de Soto came after Columbus and captured the natives of American mainland. He brought them to the American islands, taught them their Latin language, and then sent them back to the mainland to be used to help with the colonization and to oversee the building of settlements by the natives doing the work, basically helping as a middleman to enslave them. So they get slaves from the island, they teach them the Latin, then they send them back to the mainland to mix in with the people. Man, it's like an early COINTELPRO. Good COINTELPRO. I'm telling you. Oh, like the secret Hoover FBI. So we're going to get a slave. We're going to teach him our language. And then we're going to go send him back with a couple more and encourage the people, to do what we need them to do so we can colonize them. And with that colonization, to oversee the building of settlements by the natives, basically helping as a middleman to enslave them. These Latin invaders established colonies in present-day Florida, Mexico, and Central America, enslaving the native copper-colored people. The main hub for the European Englishmen was Virginia. The method was to kill the men of the natives and impregnate the woman. I know that's barbarism, but that's how we did it. That's how it happened. Making a long story short, the copper-colored people were loving and kind and passive people, and frankly, according to Columbus's notes, easy to enslave. In 1807, listen, Columbus wrote that when he got here, and I'm paraphrasing, he said that the people were so kind and so inviting that they wouldn't need any weapons to enslave them. That's how easy it was. That's how much love we had in the land. My. In 1807, a law was passed which made transporting prisoners of war, you call them slaves, they were actually prisoners of war, we're going to talk about that as well, across the ocean and into the American territory illegal. It was not enforced passionately, but the law was there. 1807, no more slaves. 1807, by law, you couldn't bring slaves across from Africa. Anyway, for a colony so dependent on slavery, why would it pass such a law in 1807? For those of you who are questioning my position or the actual historical position that the African diaspora is greatly exaggerated in number because the copper-colored people, the Asiatic people, the dark-hued people were already here. They are the Native Americans. The answer is simple. Listen to this. Now, the vast majority of slaves were native to the land. So we have census. The census numbers of American territory from the 1700s through the 1800s clearly indicate that the vast majority of slaves were already here. What do you mean, truth? How'd you jump there? Because we have the census numbers. Man, that Library of Congress. You can look online. You can see how many they're Native Americans or Americans. And it's funny because the old paperwork calls us Americans. But anyway, we're here. And we got it through the numbers of the population from the 1700s through the 1800s. And they clearly indicate the vast majority of slaves. We were already here. It's not possible to grow even with aggressive breeding. And yes, they practice breeding. It's not possible to grow a population of 150,000 slaves into 4.5 million in 200 years. Let me tell you how this works. It takes 70 to 79 years to double a population. Standard numbers. Scholars argue between 70 and 79. But that's it. That's how many years it takes to double the population. And you can't, if you double 150, that's 300,000. If you double 300,000, that's 600,000. And what do you got? You got 160 years already. We're talking 4.5 million. And that's stretching it. The copper-colored people were already here, you guys. I acknowledge that people from the great Songhay Empire from across the Atlantic were captured as prisoners. And they were prisoners of war and enslaved. They were still copper-colored people. Darky people, and brought to the continental Americas. But the number of them that made that trek were not near the millions as reported by many historians. Millions and millions of us came over here on slavery. I have my PhD in that. Stop it. The gig is up. It's a false history. Well, why hide that we were already here? Oh, now you're getting into something called birthright theft. Because if you're already here, you have claims to the land like you can't imagine. You are. If you're Asiatic, if you're Moorish American, if you're Native American, if you're the copper-colored races or the descendants thereof and descendants of slaves, you are the heirs to the greatest unclaimed inheritance in the history of the world. But you have to be the proper status to have a shot at claiming it. Stay with me because we're going to get there. So, yes, they were trafficking prisoners of war. And you say, prisoners of war, well, you call them slaves, but they were actually prisoners of war across the Atlantic Ocean via warships. But that transferring was relatively small compared to the enslaved copper-colored people that were native to the American land. So, just to be clear, one more time, the reported massive transatlantic slave trade as defined in the majority of your history books of today never happened. Not in the numbers that they present. The well-documented journals of Christopher Columbus and Hernando de Soto clearly and plainly state that copper-colored people were already here and that they were easily enslaved. And the census from the 1700s, and they're logging in the slaves, and even if you say, oh, well, they cheated and didn't count them all, you cannot jump from 150,000 to 4.5 million or 5 million in 200 years. Can't do it. Can't do it. Can't do it. They were already here. That was the first thing. Now let's get back to that second elephant in the room. Two elephants in the room. One, truth. Come on. Give me more on the African diaspora. That's a big pill to swallow, pal. We get it in elementary school. We get it in middle school. We get it in high school. We get it in colleges and universities. You get it in some colleges and some universities. Oh, man. So, all right, I got it. Well, yeah, well, okay, well, let's get into this other thing. These names and who's, called black and not black, and you can't say Negro, and truth, what do you do? Please explain this to me. Explain this. Well, let me put it to you this way. I'm going to give it to you straight coffee. No sugar, no cream. Man, there's a trickery afoot. Now, we talked about us being the heirs to the greatest unclaimed inheritance in the history of the world. And we talked about early on the show that the land that you stand on, if somebody asks you, hey, have you ever been to Africa? And most folks, homegrown here say, well, no. The answer is yes, because you're standing on it. The old maps go back to the 1300s. Oh man, I can't wait till I show y'all this online. The old maps show that this land, the American territory, the Americas, was the empire of Morocco, North America, Central America, South America, and the adjoining islands. They were identified as the Empire of Morocco. So, we talked about that agreement that was made between the Sultan of Morocco and the so-called founding fathers. And the agreement was that they could do business on this land. And everybody would eat. It would be one of the only lands where Christian and Muslim and Yahudi, didn't matter your religion, or Hebrew, Jew, you call them, it didn't matter the religion. We could all come together and work as one to generate income. But of course, the minions from the Sultan of Morocco, that's his people, that's his land, and that's his money, would be used as seed to cultivate the land and to build the infrastructure. And that was the agreement. And they're hiding because you are already here. And if you're already here, then that makes you the heir. And given time, we're going to, like I said before, we're going to try to get into trust law and explain the importance of just that. So the question is, what's the problem with, being called, Negro, black? Okay, here it is. In law, remember now, this whole thing is about law. The whole thing is about law. And what you got to realize is that a lot of times with the vast majority, where the oligarchy or the few are pushing the vast majority to do, then you gotta be suspect. I'm sorry. I don't want to be cynical, but that's just what it is. So this vast majority was told that, well, we're going to make a decision. Well, what kind of decision are you going to make? We are going to take these people with these branded names, and I'm telling you, when you use the branded names, you fall into a legal category of an artificial person. Oh, truth. Here we go. Come on. Give me a minute to make my case, but let me go. I'm in a legal dictionary, and remember now, you're talking about out of all the population right now of copper-colored people, Asiatic people, Native American people, Moorish American people, Moors, the people of dark hue, 99.7% have never opened, read, or seen a law book. And here we are, a nation of laws. That's interesting. And it turns out that not all the laws, but the fundamental laws that have to do with your birthright, those laws work against you. So what is an artificial person? An artificial person created and devised by human laws for the purposes of society and government. Person created and devised by human laws for the purposes of society and government, as distinguished from a natural person. Corporations are examples of artificial persons. And then it gives the case law where you can reference this legal finding. So what are you saying if you are an artificial person? Well, what makes me an artificial person? Wait a minute. Let me I'm coming. Let me tell you what a natural person. So there's an artificial person in law and there's a natural person in law. A natural person